So welcome, BJ. We're so excited you're here.
Awesome. Thank you, Alicia.
You
So when you hear that and you hear the what's changed across 25 years, apparently what it means is I'm old and I can't keep a job. When you hear all the different companies in the 25 years. So I now get to be what I never thought I'd be when I used to sit in those seats, which was the old guy they bring in to tell you about what's changed over the last 25 years of selling software. What I will tell you is what I think is a little bit unique about what I've done is that like many of you in this room, I actually, or maybe unlike, I grew up, I've only done software sales. Right, and that's not always a common thing. So if you are selling widgets or things you actually have to manufacture and you have fixed costs, I have no idea what to talk to you about, or one-time revenue, right? I am only ARR, build things in the sky, sell it for lots of money, have companies worth ridiculous multiples. It's a good place to be. That's where I've spent my career. Really quickly about Simpler, and then we'll get into some content. And by the way, I have two goals for today, right? I hate boring keynote speakers, and so my goal is we will not be boring, we'll have a little fun. I don't do really scripted things. People try to prepare speeches for me, I tear them up, I don't listen to them. We're gonna have a conversation, and I'll try to give you one or two things. Hopefully you can leave, right, that's value. One or two things like, hey, I didn't think about that, or hey, that was a dumb mistake, I don't wanna make that, and there's value in that. And so try to give you one or two things you can leave with. Really quickly about Simpler. Unless you are in a hospital system, acute care facility, ambulatory, long-term care, senior living facility, you have no idea who we are, I guarantee. Or if you watch Pro Golf, we do sponsor Sepp Straka and Russell Henley. Two-time tour winner this year, Sepp Straka, by the way. Very, very happy about that. Also, 2 Georgia Bulldogs. Thank you very much. There is 100% CEO discretion taken in those picks. You get very few perks. There are no parking spots anymore. We don't even have offices. I pick our golfers, right? And they're both Georgia Bulldogs. But Simpler is a really cool company. We actually have a very noble purpose. So who we are and what we do as people is we actually automate a lot of the non-clinical operational workflow that nurses and doctors have to do that take away from, frankly, providing care. And so credentialing and scheduling and contract management and compliance, quality, and safety reporting, right? We do all the things for them so that they do right now manually, it's horrible, so they can spend more time with patients, right? That's the value that we provide systems. By the numbers, a little bit more interesting. We've tripled in the last 4 years. When I walked in the door, we were a $1.8 billion value company. If you look at any of the multiples right now in the last 3 or 4 months and what health tech's trading for, we're about a $6.5 to $7.5 billion company by enterprise value. We serve 95%, give or take, of the U.S. acute care market. We've got about 6,000 customers, in post-acute or ambulatory facilities. We've got 40% of the payer market. We are about 2,000 team members. We've got 400 folks in India, 1,600 here in the U.S. 99.3% of our revenue is U.S.-based. We did an acquisition. I can't sell it off, so I got 15 people in the Netherlands. Everyone wants to go there to see the team. I don't let anyone, if I could kill it, I would, but I can't. But so 99.3% revenue in the U.S., 93% ARR, 7% one time. We run at about 83% gross margin. We grow mid to high single digits, and we, don't tell your CFOs that we put off 53% adjusted EBITDA a year. And so from a financial profile, very, very attractive company. What's really cool, though, is we actually built a category. So we are a private equity roll-up. We started with a series of acquisitions, created a thesis of creating a subcategory within healthcare. We did several acquisitions. The cool thing is we didn't just buy them and then sell them as point products. We actually did the hard work, invested $52 million, and created an interoperable platform hosted on AWS, which we actually brought to market in February with pretty extraordinary results thus far. So pretty cool company. Hopefully, that gives me the right to stand up here and tell you guys the story. But I think more importantly for this group is I grew up in sales, and proudly. I will actually say proudly grew up in sales. Lived first 23 years of my career in some sort of go-to-market roles. Go-to-market role inside a software or technology services company. And then for the last 4.5 years, somehow they let a fox in the hen house, and I've, got to be the CEO who's really a seller at heart. So that's been a lot of fun for me. And so again, some things from the career journey may be helpful, some things may be things to avoid, but I can kind of show you what I've learned and what, to the degree that any of you aspire to do this, right, wrong, or otherwise, may help you. Or if you just frankly want to have a better relationship with your CEO as a revenue leader, it's something hopefully I can help share a few things. What's worked for me, what's changed and what hasn't. I thought this was actually a really cool idea from the SBI folks, who, by the way, I'm a huge fan, mini commercial for them. We've done a couple engagements with them over the last couple of years. They've been a key driver of some of Simpler's ability to really create value messaging, do some coverage and capacity work, help us define our success motion. So very, very thankful for them, which is why I'm here the day before I'm going to LA for a board meeting. So I will literally be like dropping the mic with you guys, heading into a car and doing board prep for the next 5.5 hours on Delta and seat 3B. But what's changed and what hasn't? In the last 25 years, there have been a lot of advancements in technology. Some people would argue there have been a lot of advancements in how you sell. I think a lot of that's bullshit. I think a lot of the fundamentals actually haven't changed, but our ability to move faster with better data and better tools and insights actually has. And so I'll give you my perspective, one man's point of view, on what's actually changed and what hasn't changed over 25 years of selling software and technology. A little bit about looking forward. How to think about, and we wrote these slides before the quasi-reversal / 90-day extension on China tariffs, but it's a weird year, right? No, I'm walking to a board meeting going, hey, we're making the first half. That's great. BJ, you're gonna make the full year. I have no idea. It could be a banner year. We've got a lot of leading indicators that say it's gonna be a blowout year. Second half could crater. Honestly, based on some interesting buying signals we're seeing in some of the regulatory and executive action mandates that directly impact healthcare. And so we're scenario planning everything right now. But I will tell you, in spite of that, I lived through the crash in 01, 02, the tech bubble. I lived through the financial crisis of 08, 09. I lived through the debt market fun of the last 3 years. I would argue you can sell through any of it, but you have to change how you think about and how you really adapt to a highly variable landscape, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then just a few things, from my perspective of what is value in publicly traded or privately held or private equity-owned organizations, and how can you best deliver consistent value through the right relationships with your CEOs, with your boards, et cetera, et cetera. I've just found that if you're aligned with them, everybody's lives are a lot easier. So a couple comments on that. We'll do a little bit of Q&A, and Bob's your uncle. Cool? All right, awesome. So my comms team built this for me, and for some reason they know I hate builds, so every slide has a build. So just so, yeah, I think they do it to mess with me. Because why not, right? But I apologize if it's a little bit clunky. Oh, good, transitions and builds. Perfect, that's gonna be awesome. My kids actually laugh because they're like, Dad, what's a PowerPoint? Everyone uses Google Slides. So they actually think I'm 100 years old. So really quick walk on each of these and what's kind of contextually relevant here. The funny thing is my comms team won't put it on here. My first job is not on here, but I think it's important because it really shows that you can start from anywhere. I graduated from State University of New York in Geneseo, which is a tiny 4,000 person liberal arts college south of Rochester that most of you, unless you're from New York, have never heard of. Moved to Atlanta. They didn't hear of it either, couldn't get a real job, ended up getting a job as a bill collector. All right, literally calling old ladies in rural Alabama to tell them that the Bell South mobility cell phone and all the minutes they co-signed for on their alcoholic nephew, they now owe money on, and we're going to repossess their house. That was literally my first job for 6 months. Left, I was good at it. I hated myself. This is before all the collection acts got passed, right? I would leave feeling dirty every day. Somehow went from that into, I can't do this anymore. Buddy of mine worked for CompUSA Corporate, said, this is pre-Y2K, come do this with me. You have a big mouth, you like to talk to people. I said, great, I know nothing about technology and salespeople. I grew up in a blue-collar household. They were the sleazy guys in the front office or used car salespeople. He said, this is what I made last month. I said, I can try this sales thing. That's a very true story, sadly. Did the CompUSA thing for a little bit, then went to some technology training companies, so computer software training classes. If you guys remember Knowledge Alliance and New Horizons computer learning centers, if you're around my age back in the day, right? I was doing corporate sales for them, got laid off in 2003. I can actually say I've been laid off, right? I refused to move to Anaheim, California. Fancy that. And best thing I ever did, because a couple months later, I got my first real software job with Sage Software. And I've spent the last 2 years exclusively doing the software side. Sage was a little bit of business development, so think back at the time, like install-based BDRs we were trying to call into a pretty big multi-million customer install base and get them to migrate up to our more expensive mid-market products, right? So there's a little bit of that. Then moved into a sales operations and strategy role. We actually redid go-to-market, including multi-channel, and then got promoted to our acquisitions team, oversaw sales and marketing integrations for 6 acquisitions, which who knew then would set me up for a career in private equity. From there, got recruited to Intuit. Intuit was a cool gig because I got asked to do 2 things there that they didn't have a lot of experience in. The first one was they had bought some higher average order value products. One was called Enterprise, one was called Point of Sale. And they were trying to sell these products to their QuickBooks base the same way they sold QuickBooks. Well, that was a bit of a disaster, right? And they were really, really underperforming. And Point of Sale had a heavy hardware component to it, and a lot of people didn't understand it. And so was brought in to help really turn those businesses around. One was in decline, one was basically flatline. And we did some work around coverage capacity. We did some sub-segmentation work. We actually did some channel work. We actually built up a channel. We built up a 700 partner channel in 18 months. And we actually turned them both into the 2 highest performing and fastest growing segments inside of the portfolio. And they really let me play with an experiment with a lot of things there. Fast forward, I got an opportunity to do a global thing. At Intuit, it's amazing, but it's a little bit slow in terms of career advancement. And so the strategist who had done the go-to-market work with me at Sage, there's a theme to that. I've never looked for a job. They just kind of happen. But the guy who had done the consulting work from MarketBridge with us at Sage took the global leader of channels at CA and said, hey, CA's broken. I like broken things. Take 5% to 7% is a little bit boring to me. I want a mess, right? I want to come in and get my hands dirty and fix. Well, enter CA, right, which doesn't even exist anymore. And if you ever spent, any time at CA or with CA people, you'll understand that. But they were fundamentally broken in terms of direct and channels interaction model, right? They had a $600 million channel. They had a $3.4 billion direct business, and they hated each other. And so the whole ask here was, can you actually create channel harmony and kind of do a 1 + 1 = 3 scenario? And so we redid compensation models, we redid channel engagement models, we redid channel engagement overall and enablement, built out business development plans for channel, expanded our global footprint, added a lot of resources, showed direct people that if you work with channel, you can actually sell more than you can yourself, created a force multiplying effect, and had a really good run there. And then a buddy of mine from Intuit said, hey, LexisNexis has bought 14 software companies and is trying to kill them all at the same time. They've actually hired me, a software person. If you're doing LexisNexis Legal and Professional, it's a research company. It's a technology company now. But then they were still selling books and things. And they bought a bunch of software assets, and they just didn't know what to do with them. They had research people over software assets. And so they hired Mike, and Mike hired me to kind of COO type of role, sales, services, marketing, technical writing, which is weird, but they kept giving me things. But we ended up transforming that business from a relative decliner into a 14% grower at the time inside of a pretty big old company, which is pretty cool. From there, Vertafore, first chance to do it at a company level. And so I'm a big believer. Some people in PE will tell you that I'm wrong. Whatever. I have the mic. I can say whatever I want. You grow up in different sized companies, and I think at some point, some people may have the ability to flex and do a $50 million company or a $1 billion company. I think I would kill a $50 or a $25 million company. I wouldn't know what to do. The whole everyone has 3 jobs things make no sense to me, right? The entrepreneurial, I'm structure and scale and process and data and discipline and rigor. So I'm a big believer in doing things at scale, or at least that's where my experience is. And so Vertafore was about a $500 million company, and I got the chance to do it. Chief Sales and Marketing Officer there. It's a pretty good story. We walked in the door. We were a $2.7 billion company. We sold 3 years and 8 months later during the pandemic for $5.4 billion to Roper. Had a really nice exit. A lot of it was based on go-to-market. We did interestingly there, that's the most money I've ever made in my career, and all we did was the fundamentals. All right, that's the cool thing about private equity. In big companies, you have a little bit more time, and you certainly have a lot more infrastructure and OpEx and CapEx to deploy against projects. In private equity, we buy things that are typically underrun. We come in, fix them the right way, and we sell them for a lot more money. it's really the fundamentals. We did coverage and capacity. We did comp plans. We did sales methodology. We did talent and performance management assessments. We up-leveled the skill set of the organization. We actually made it fun to be a salesperson again at our company. We built relationships with customers. And, we doubled enterprise value in 3.5 years. And oh, by the way, they taught me how to throw grenades and shoot people before that. So I can't lose the haircut or the tattoos, but did serve for 8 years in the Marine Corps Reserves. I'm very proud of that. All right, so some of the what's worked for me, and this is like, I'm trying to make this interesting as we go, because who gives a shit about the companies I've worked for, right? But anyways, so things I've learned, kind of the fundamental pivotal moments for me in my career relative to like step function improvements. Intuit, for those of you guys who don't know, Intuit was run for a while by its founder, Scott Cook, and then it got kind of big, and he realized it was going to explode. And when they had the GE battle to succeed Jack Welch, and Jeff Immelt got the job, there's a guy named Steve Bennett who was like number 2 or number 3, depending on who you ask. If you ask him, he would have said number 2. And Intuit actually grabbed him. So they took this big GE guy, brought him to Silicon Valley. And what Intuit became, and I think still is one of the best software leadership factories. They took a lot of that GE best practice. You learn every function, you learn every job. But one thing they really taught me, when I got to Intuit from Sage, we were really good at creating results, but I would argue we weren't doing it the right way, right? And I know in sales we can kind of get away with a lot, and sometimes we abuse that, and over time we kind of learn not to, and then you try to teach the generation that comes after you. But I was doing all the classic things, I'd yell in meetings, and I'd stomp my feet, and I'd break a lot of glass, and people couldn't keep up with me. I'd call them dumb, and I was a pretty horrible person and peer back then. And what Intuit did, and I'm like 29, 30 years old, but I've been very successful, and so you didn't know any better. And there was this meeting with our CEO, and I tell you this story because this one changed my life in a lot of ways. And we went in there, and we had transformed those 2 businesses I told you about. We had a meeting with the CEO in Tucson, Arizona, and I went in, and I was like just popping off for 45 minutes. And I did this, and I did that, and look at the results, and look at the margin, and look at the growth, and look at this, and look at that, and look at me. And I'm literally having this like out-of-body moment experience where I'm looking down on myself saying, shut up, what is wrong with you? Like, I knew I was being ridiculous, but whatever, I got done, and they said, hey, do us a favor, go wait for us, and we'll come kind of debrief with you. And my boss came up to me, a guy named Mark Little, and new boss, and he pulled me aside, and he said, hey, how'd you think that presentation went? I'm like, well, the results speak for themselves. I figured you guys were talking about what you're going to promote me into and what you're going to have me do next. He's like, yeah, we just had a 45-minute conversation about whether or not we should let you go. It's not just the what, it's also the how. And Intuit could hire anybody in the world, right? And I'm this SUNY Geneseo kid, right, with actually a Georgia MBA at the time, which I was very proud of. But, everybody there is to Harvard and Stanford and Penn and all the things, and Boston Consulting Group and all the fancy people. And here I am, and I'm driving results, and they literally are about to fire me. And they said, we think you're a learner. It's your one saving grace, and so we're actually going to get you an executive coach, and if you lean into that, we'll see where it goes. And I went home, and I told my wife what happened, and she said, well, what are you going to do? And my initial reaction was, screw them, I'm going to quit. I'll take this amazing asset of skills somewhere else that'll appreciate it, right? And she went, yeah, maybe. Or maybe you've told me how much you respect these people, and maybe you should listen to them and actually try. And she and they were right. And so I committed to the process, and I really leaned into it. And we got these 360s. And the comment I'll remember from they did 14 360s. And it was like, we've never seen so much good feedback and so much bad feedback on the same person, and nothing in the middle. And so I committed over the next 6 months, probably year. They called it BJ 2.0. I don't know if that was a compliment or an insult or maybe both. But I really committed to changing how I showed up and committed to changing who I was as a leader. And you got to remember, for a guy who's now 48, a lot of what we grew up with was the idea of guys in suits in the 80s that would yell at people and get their way and grandstand, and that kind of alpha testosterone male thing was really like in the corporate mindset. And what a load of crap that's obviously turned out to be, right? If you actually just show up, if you're a nice guy at home, or a nice guy or gal at home, and you show up as a nice guy or gal at work, you can actually get the same results. And what's really interesting is if you rally your people behind you and everybody believes you have good intent, you treat everyone respectfully. These sound so obvious, I know, right? But I guarantee you, if you're in this room, you're in sales, you either have done it or you've seen it. Because again, somehow we're the one group allowed to get away with it more than others. But that was really one of those moments where I fixed that and my career started to do this, right? And without thinking about the how, and I still think about my how a lot now as a CEO, right? I'm responsible for the how with 2,000 people and how my leaders show up and how they treat their people. And are they teachers or are they managers, right? I need teachers, not managers. Performance management is easy. Teaching is hard. And so that was just a really big moment for me that I think, compounded the effects of some of the good things that we figured out how to do. Vertafore was a lesson, honestly, I mentioned this in the early comments, but it was really about the fundamentals. And so many of the things that we learn in these go-to-market roles, sales ops, sales enablement, channel, right? You're learning every day, whether you're leading these functions or you're sitting around a leadership table. And that's one of the big lessons for me is I didn't think I was ready to be a CEO until I started remembering all the executive teams that I sat on. And if you pay attention in those meetings, as silly as that sounds, when your engineering leader is talking about escape or defect rates, when your professional services leader is talking about capacity or utilization or go lives, when your HR leader is talking about regrettable attrition and what's actually driving down your eNPS score, you're actually getting the toolkit and you're getting a lot of the on-the-job training that you need for the bigger jobs while you're in your current one. But the whole Vertafore message is honestly, if you get the fundamentals right, and I mean really, really hammer the ABCs, coverage, capacity, value messaging, velocity, average order value, contracting, customer experience, relationship management, customer engagement, renewals, it's really 95% of the business. The rest of the stuff, you can innovate, you can tweak, you can accelerate, but if you don't have the fundamentals, none of the rest of it matters. It doesn't matter how good or bad your products are. It doesn't matter how good or bad your services are. A lot of software people, right, we love to blame our products. Well, our products aren't good enough, you're not innovating fast enough. Or we love to blame services. Well, you had a bad go live. Well, it's all a team, right? And there are no MVPs on a losing team. And at the end of the day, if you don't sell past your roadmap, if you actually learn how the deal you architect impacts the financial profile and the returns of your company, if you actually partner with your services team and have a better handoff, right, you can actually be part of fixing a lot of those things from the function in which you sit. And Vertafore really taught me the power of being a sales and marketing leader that was truly cross-functionally. The best part about private equity is we're all not trying to be the CEO. Right? In a big company, there's politicking. None of that exists, at least in my 2 experiences, 8.5 years. All that political crap's gone. You're all trying to achieve an outcome. The outcome is make this company as valuable as possible, sell it, make a lot of money, stay if you want, go if you want. But you're all swimming in the same direction. And man, when you get the basics right, you can do amazing things, even with a stodgy old 40-year-old company that everybody had written off. And then simpler, honestly, still learning simpler. I mean, I don't even know the lessons I have to share yet. It's been 4.5 years. The biggest one is little acquisitions are harder than big acquisitions. Every single time. Every single time. We've done deals that are $600 million in enterprise value. We've done deals that are we're about to do one $70 million, tiny little deal. We did a little one for $42 million. That one almost killed the company, not the $600 million one, right? That is one interesting lesson. But the big one there is if you create a culture of transparency, people will follow you through constant change, even if they don't agree with all the decisions. And so we run the company in a remote environment. Everything we do is through virtual town halls, right? But we are in front of people consistently, and we are constantly, with full transparency, talking about how we're doing, where we're doing well, where we're doing poorly, talking about where we invest in the company, where we're going to scale back. And as a result, from the feedback we get and the data we have, our regrettable attrition is under 1.7% a year with 2,000 people. There is no greater killer of productivity than attrition. You all know that, right? Particularly in selling organizations. People start to attrit, say goodbye to your year. Guarantee, right? And then what do? You go to your CEO and you go, well, we've got an attrition problem. And he goes, fix it. And you go, oh, yeah, I should have thought of this 6 months ago, not now, because it's a lot easier to be proactive than reactive. So alignment, transparency, the simpler story is still playing itself out, but those are some of the things I think that have worked really well for us so far as we've almost quadrupled the value of the organization. So this was kind of the fun one for me to think about over my 25 years. Thank you guys for that title of this presentation. So 25 plus, thank you. Thank you. You must have gone to Georgia Tech. Georgia, we round. So the things, in my opinion, that have stayed the same, that we all want to talk about, if you read Matt and Brent's book, right, and the Challenger sale, and here's it's fine. People don't buy from who they like. They do now and have always bought from who they trust, ultimately. And your relationship with a buyer, with a customer, with a partner, how that shows up may be different. We may not play as much golf as we used to. We may not go out drinking as much as we used to, right? Thank God. But ultimately, people buy from who they trust because what you're doing is in a lot of ways, particularly if you're a technology salesperson, you are ultimately determining if they're going to be successful or not. How many corporate executives lose their job over failed technology implementations? It happens all the time, right? I will buy an inferior product from that's simpler. This is my litmus test. For anything over, I think it's $1 million, maybe it's $500,000, it has to come to me. And whenever I'm evaluating a vendor, or hopefully a partner, when there's a difference, what I basically say is, show me referenceability, show me where it's gone well. I want to understand contractually what teeth you have in the game. But what it really comes down to is, do I trust them to do a good job? And I will always buy an inferior product, right, from someone I trust to install it better. Because 100% implementation of an inferior product will always be better than a crappy implementation of a superior product, right? And again, we know this intrinsically. We know this intellectually as software salespeople. But somehow our best reps get it. A lot of our reps can't translate that into activity because they're trying to trade on every interaction. They're trying to be the obnoxious salesperson. They're being salesy, right? And the irony is, if you think about the best salespeople in your organizations, they're usually the least salesy, right? They're the ones that actually go out, build confidence, inspire trust, can articulate value consistently. But I don't think this has changed. Now, how you build relationships, it's funny because buyers have actually, I think, become more calloused because they're getting inundated, right? And so finding them where they are, showing up, adding value, that's part of what's changed a little bit, right? And that's kind of the tactics piece. But I will tell you, long-term success is built through trusted relationships. And my ultimate measure, people will say, BJ, how do you measure that? You can measure everything on here. Not surprisingly, given where I grew up, everything we do, we measure, right? But what I believe is if a buyer will leave one company and go to another and buy from you again, you have a trusted relationship. It's the ultimate sign of whether or not you've built trust. Because those relationships will transcend their company, they'll also transcend yours, right? And depending on what you do in the same category, in the same world, that matters a lot. The science of selling, or as I call it, the laziness of selling. Bring me a sales rep that does not know how to, and some people kind of work it back, I work it forward. I know that if I do this many in-person events and I talk to this many people, I can generate this much pipeline, and given this sales cycle and with my average conversion rate, I can get to this number, which is this far above my quota for the end of the year, and I'm going to spend this much time building pipeline, because if I do that, I can hit next year's number too. Your best sellers always, 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 always know the math of selling. Always. Your highly variable, inconsistent, poor performers, why did I get sales in the first place, are big deal dependent, which kind of sucks for my company right now because I need 2 deals to close this quarter, which absolutely sucks, right? It's funny how we do all this work and we end up in the same spot year after year, year after year after year. But you all need to know certainly the science of selling. You need to make it obvious for your people, and you need to inspect and performance manage through them the science of selling. This has not changed in 25 years. You got to know how to get to your number, and it's formulaic every single time. And if you don't believe it is, send me your stuff. I'll do your formula for you, right? But I promise you there is a simple equation to this much activity generate this much pipe with this much progression, with this much marketing influence, with this conversion rate over time at this average order value. Bob's your uncle, right? Now, sometimes you can't always get to your budget doing the math. Then you got a different problem, right? Then your quota allocation model doesn't align to your budget. Then you and your CFO need to have a serious talk. But the science of selling has not changed. Make sure you and your people know the science of selling. Consistency, how you show up, how you apply your craft. I'm a big believer in role-playing and practicing. right? The consistency, your ability to deliver your value message consistently or your people's, right, will ultimately feed the science. But if you show up variably, you will have variable results. And then finally, disruption. Believe it or not, this is a presentation without AI in it, right? Can you actually believe that? Well, I'll talk about it for a second. But it's not the theme of the conversation. But there's always going to be someone who's disrupting. There's always going to be the next shiny thing. Just beware of those. Understand how to sell around them. Understand how to be wary of them when they're real. But there's always disruption. What has changed? Your access to data. Where we started 25 years ago and where we are now relative to your access to data. And hopefully you guys are capitalizing on this, right? And this is actually where I think AI can help salespeople, is giving you access to very real, very insightful data with much greater frequency and with much more impact, right? It's no longer spreadsheets you have to go comb through to look for logic in the chaos. It's really about, are you doing this? Or if really done well, the data will inform an activity in your CRM, which is just telling them to do things, right? That has evolved wildly. The tactics, whether you're an enterprise or whether you're an SMB, what it now takes to get to a transaction, I do think has evolved, right? And this, I'll just speak to the businesses I've been in, but contracting now is infinitely harder than it used to be, particularly in technology, right? Think about how many of you are doing, I'm in healthcare, right? I can't do a contract right now without doing a 150-page security audit. And it doesn't matter if I show up with my SOC 2, and it doesn't matter if I show up with Enterprise High Trust, and it doesn't matter if I put my weird-ass CISO on a plane and have them go talk to their CISO, all right? We're not recording this. Can we make sure that part never sees the light of day? I need that crazy son of a bitch. But the tactics of how you actually architect and get a deal done have changed, and I would just really pay attention to those because they can be deal extenders, they can be deal killers. What we're being asked to now accept is limitation of liability, as indemnification conditions in contracts. I mean, I keep seeing now, oh, we have to have a T for C. Look at the economy. And I'm like, I work in the economy. What do you, Salesforce isn't giving me a T. So I will tell you, the tactics can be a little bit more variable. Also, the culture's changed. And I've seen this even swing in the last 5 to 10 years, right? Nobody knows what the hell to do right now with salespeople, with return to work or not, right? Half of them weren't, 3/4 of them weren't in the office before. I'm even thinking about a headquarters right now, and do I put salespeople or do I not? I want to have product management together. I see the benefit. If we do telesales, obviously I'll have that there. But this whole culture is dynamic. Your values should not be, but your culture is. Does that make sense? Right? Your values are who you are and what it looks like to show up right every day at work at your organization. Your culture is going to shift. And even the culture of sales teams. Like, these kids don't care about money as much as we did. And that scares the shit out of me. Because why do what we do? I mean, you know, listen, the relationships are awesome. And the hard work is awesome. The late nights and the travel you get to do when you're young, and then you can build an amazing career, and you paid a lot of money for what is in the grand, I've been shot at, right? In the grand scheme of things, this is not high-stress hard work, right? But there's a different now cultural alignment in some of the younger generation. You got to tie it to organizational value, right? You have to tie it to how are we helping society. You have to tie it to your noble purpose. That's not wrong. That's just different. And I'll tell you, if you're like me, I've got 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds. I have a couple high 70-year-olds in my company, right? Trying to find those. You know, if I say, hey, be on a call at 8 o'clock, they're all there at 7:55, and they're prepared, and they look nice, and some of them are wearing a tie, and it's weird as hell, right? These are my 70-year-olds. If I say a call starting at 8 o'clock, you know, my 23-year-olds are showing up around 8:05 going, hey, what are we talking about today? Ah, BJ, I got my simple t-shirt on. I look great. You're like, what in the hell are we doing here? So, and like, why are you dropping your mic? Because I said, there you go, because I said I wouldn't. Anyways, just be mindful that your culture, if you assume the culture will adapt to you as you advance, you're probably going to be wrong. You have to be intentional. This goes back to the how about really adapting to your culture. A few quick things here. How am I doing on time? Not terrible. This one I thought was incredibly relevant given where we are in the moment, right? So everybody remembers, I was a young seller when the crash happened in '01 and '02. '08, '09 was Looney Tunes, for everybody who remembers that. COVID, it's 5 years ago now. Right, 5 years ago now. March 12th, I was very proud of this stat. We made 11 quarters in a row. At or above budget. And no, our budgets weren't too low for any of you smart-ass, sales ops people in the room, which would naturally go, your quotas were too low if you made every one. No. When you have 4 CFOs in that period of time, you can definitely take some liberties in the budgets you set. But, by the way, I'm sure you all know this, but a little tip. I got really, really, really financially literate in my early 30s. And I think it made me really, really powerful as a go-to-market leader, because not only could I spar with my CFO in a healthy way, but if you understand what they're solving for, how you run your organization, how you architect your deals, how you think about profitability, long-term, short-term commission plans, it is a little bit of a different language, and becoming a financially savvy go-to-market leader, I think made me a much better go-to-market leader, for what it's worth. And that was all internal stuff, but also it helps you write contracts and talk to buyers too. But anyways, the whole point of this was the first quarter we missed was Q2 of 2020. And so it was really weird for me because that was COVID, nobody knew what to do, and nobody bought a thing, right, from March 12th or March 13th, depending on what day you went home. Thursday for us was the trial, that was March 12th. March 13th was the day, really, the country shut down, if you remember. I'm still sitting in the same chair that I went to on March 12th, 5 years later. But that was a tough time. And so what's the takeaway here? There will be down markets, there will be unpredictable markets. This could be broadly at a macroeconomic level, right? Like we're potentially seeing right now. I actually don't believe it. I will also tell you, when you become CEO and you carry $2.1 billion in debt, you become a little bit of an economist, whether or not you want to be. And if you actually look at non-farm payrolls, if you actually look at consumer debt rates, there actually is, and again, I am not an economist, do not trade on any of this, right? But there's a lot of underlying stability in our economy right now. So I'm predicting kind of a middle ground. I don't think it's going to be a blowout year. I don't think it's going to be a shitty year. I think it's going to be right in the middle. But what's the whole point of this slide? When you are faced with a down market or a highly variable market, you have you have 3 choices, right? Put your head in the sand and pretend it's not happening to you. Good luck with that. Go fetal and take your beating and reduce size and bring your budgets down. Or what I would encourage and suggest, and I've been very fortunate to be part of teams that have done this, in all 3 scenarios, in terms of really bad markets, we've made the decision to sell through it. And you have to actually change the economic dynamic and the economic construct of a lot of your agreements. But if you play the long game, you can, and again, some companies can do this, some companies can't, right? I've worked for reasonably larger and financially stable companies that could do this. But I'm doing this right now in healthcare. Our company's doing this right now in healthcare, right? Medicare, Medicaid reimbursements are still coming out of the last administration at about 80% what they used to be. That's bad, right? On top of that, you're seeing what were or may or may not be the tariffs potentially take healthcare systems who usually run at low single-digit margins into the unprofitable. They're going from black to red, right? And they had just gotten back to the black after a few years of being in the red. And so we could say, hey, it's going to be a tough couple of years. Let's get lean. Let's stay lean in terms of how we're going to think about commercial. We're actually going to double down. And we see an opportunity to consolidate, right? It's highly fragmented, and so we're going to go buy some share. We're going to give away some services. We're going to reduce the value of our one-time, which no one looks at in our valuation anyways, right? And we're actually going to double down on high recurring revenue opportunities where we can go consolidate and take share from our competitors. Because a lot of them, frankly, A, can't hold on like we can, and B, aren't being thoughtful. They're still trying to hold the same pricing that they were 6, 12, 18 months ago. And so that's not always the path. It's not always, drop the price and see what happens. But I will tell you that each market presents an opportunity. In 08, 09, we saw an opportunity at Intuit to do a couple acquisitions and really go after cross-sell with our installed base. Intuit had this amazing gift benefit of 26 million customers, of which 8 million were small businesses, right? You've got the biggest installed base sandbox in the world. We went away from acquisition. We went to pure cross-sell. Hey, we can save you money over what you're doing. And by the way, in the down times, your economic value message typically is what wins the day, right? Whether or not you're dropping your price or not, however you position value in the past, you now need to make sure you have an economic value message for that buyer because they're freaked out and it's all they're thinking about, right? You're selling against fear more than anything else, and there is an economic tipping point to almost any decision, particularly when you're selling against fear, and so that's how you have to think about monetizing a down economy variable. But we did cross-sell. We'll do payroll with you better, faster, cheaper than your current provider. We'll do credit card processing with you, and if you're an Intuit customer, you get price leverage, right? You're not starting from $1. You get one vendor to work with. Isn't that better? We were able to add a lot of share and do a lot of cross-sell in that time. During COVID, we actually took it on the chin. We were rolling out a new product. We were super excited about it. 2 years in development at Vertafore. It's a long time. It was this carrier submissions thing. I won't bore you with it because I still probably don't understand it very much. But we were going to make a few $1 million that year off of it, and we finally brought it to market. And what we said to our customers was, you know what? Now's not the time to capitalize on a weird market. We're going to give this to you because we think it'll help you for the next 6 months. And after that time, if you want to activate it, you just start paying us for it. And if not, we'll turn it off and we'll figure it out from there. We're just going to give it to you. In fact, by any other name, it was a trial, right? But we didn't call it a trial. We said we were helping the market and doing good things. We got like awards and shit for like helping insurance brokers during COVID. That was a marketing genius play, by the way. But we gave them a trial. And yeah, we probably sacrificed $3 million in ARR that year that we were planning on selling, which turned very quickly into $9 million the next year that we weren't planning on, right? Because all the customers we gave it to went, well, there's value here, and activated it. No one's going to do a trial period in a normal market. Who's going to trial enterprise software? The cost to deploy, the cost to set up, the InfoSec risk, all the things. But in COVID, they would. Because why not? So I would just encourage you to, as you think about your 3 options of head in the sand, go fetal, or get aggressive. Just look at the market, think about what your company does, and really think about is there an opportunity for you to take share during a down market, because they are cyclical, and this too shall pass, right? And in 60, 90, 120 days next year, right, you'll see some resiliency there, and if you've got 5%, 7%, 8% more market share than you did previously, right? If your penetration rate goes from 53% to 56%, right? Or you're now thinking about CAR, right? Contracted annual recurring revenue versus just this year's cash ARR. You can actually do pretty well. So I see them as opportunities. I'm a pretty positive guy. It's worked pretty well for us, but just think about how you can evolve with your markets. And then a few things. Oh, perfect. Love it when a plan comes together. A few things. In any organization, huge organizations, right? LexisNexis, part of Relix Group, 40,000 person organization, all the way down to little old Simpler with a couple thousand team members. What I will tell you guys is, as commercial leaders, it is easy to get bloated in terms of either quota carriers or enabling infrastructure. And I know for you guys in sales ops, you're like, screw that, we're under-resourced, under-budgeted always. I know. But the more you have the ability to flex and scale, which to me usually comes from managing a disciplined operating budget relative to whatever financial metrics you guys have in your organizations. That could be sales as a percent of revenue, right? That could be commission as a percent of revenue. That could be sales and marketing or gross margin, right, relative to benchmark. You guys may use industry benchmarks as your relative sample set, right? I spend less than 1% right now in marketing. It's criminal. But I also have 92% of the market as a customer right now, so do I really need to? I spend 14% on sales exclusively right now, which actually feels a little heavy for an installed base play, but we're rolling out a new platform. So just you want to really understand your financials, because you want to have the ability, without asking for incremental investment unless it's warranted, to pivot to a market condition. Now, if something is a step function change, if you're going from 3% growth to 8% growth, there's always a corresponding investment ask, right? But if you're going from 3 to 4, be able to self-fund that, and that comes from a lean and disciplined management of your own sales and marketing organizations or commercial organizations. So I would just, if you don't have a finance partner that sits next to you all day, every day, looks at your operating expenses, right, capital expenses, if you have them depending on your business, every single month, is working with you on understanding labor versus non-labor, what's variable, what's fixed, where you can flex, where you're underperforming and may want to innovate or invest and redeploy towards higher yielding. Just, you can only do that, A, if you're lean, and B, if you're really disciplined around the financial management of your function. And if you leave that to finance, good luck. Own it, do it yourselves. Value messaging. The point on this one, honestly, guys, is we all, me included, you can rest on your laurels a little too much and your value messaging can get stale, not only relative to your installed base, but also your competition, particularly if you're like number one or number two in your space, right? I would argue it's super easy to be 3 or 4 because all you're doing is attacking, right? If you're 1 or 2, you've got to constantly innovate and evolve your value message, and just don't get lazy with this one. I've unfortunately done this in my career, and I wish I hadn't, but you've got to, how are we delivering value? How are we delivering value? I'm still on the fence on whether or not customer service is a churn prevention or retention function, or if it's a sales function, and maybe it's a little bit of both, and maybe sales and success are going to morph together into this Frankenstein child. I don't know where it's going to land ultimately, but I will tell you that if you can't, particularly in software, recurring software, demonstrate consistent value quantitatively to your customers, you will get shopped, and it's not where you want to be. And I think if you do that well, it will actually inform the evolution of your broader value message, right? And your customers will actually tell you the value you're providing in a way you may not see it. So just never forget value messaging is a big part of what you're responsible for. And the last one is, this seems so obvious, but we get so busy in commercial roles. We're in the field, we're in the market, we're with customers, we're with our teams. We sometimes think that, headquarters is slowing us down or holding us up. But a big part of your jobs as ops leaders or CROs, I know there's a lot of different roles represented here, but if you're not aligned with your CEO on what you're doing, where you're going, what you're spending, or more importantly, because CEOs come and go sadly, if your board doesn't understand what your 3-year commercial maturity model looks like and what you're building towards, right? What the ROI for a new telesales initiative that you're putting in place looks like over 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, because we know these things take a time to ramp, and private and public boards don't think about things that way. Just make sure that you take time to tell them the story, because most of them are finance nerds, right? Or PE guys or CEOs of other companies and other industries that have no idea what you're talking about. So a big part of your role with your CEO, with your board, whatever that looks like, is teaching and setting the narrative and setting context so that you can then explain why you're doing what you're doing and avoiding scrutiny. It's not about scrutiny. That's their job, oversight and governance. But what you don't want to do, the worst thing that can happen to a commercial leader is if they get slowed down. And if you're not bringing them with you, they will sure as hell slow you down. So it's something I've learned. I got it wrong in the beginning. I'm okay at it now. Like I said, 5.5 hours of board prep on Delta 3B this afternoon into tomorrow. Just make sure you're aligned with your ownership, and things will go a lot better for you, which typically goes a lot better for your teams. And with that, I'm 5 minutes over. Well, it's not bad. Oh, then I nailed it. I landed the plane on. 15 minutes of Q&A. Oh, man, that's 25 plus years of experience right there. All right, what can I don't know if any of this was helpful, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Please.
Why are smaller acquisitions harder than large ones?
They take the same amount of effort for infinitely less return. You are going to have the same cultural challenges. You are going to have the same technology infrastructure integration challenges. You are going to have the same customer churn challenges. Sometimes it's even worse. The problem is with smaller companies that they rarely have the operational rigor that bigger companies do. There's no documentation, right? There's no technical documentation on release 4.3 that rolled 3 years ago that now is causing all your churn. Right? It's that dude, right? And you hear it, right? Oh, yeah, we let Billy go 3 months before you bought us because, he was expensive. I'm like, now I got to go hire back Billy? Right? Who the hell is Billy? And, of course, Billy's like, in the Ukraine and, This is a true story, by the way. He's like Igor, not Billy, but the rest of that story is true. And so it's just, there's less structure, there's less operational maturity, which actually then makes the integration that much harder. And folks, bigger acquisitions are used to bigger organizations culturally, and smaller acquisitions come in and go, but you're not doing it our way. Why would we do it your way? And we say, well, because we bought you and you're now ours. You do whatever we say. And they're like, no, but we were kicking your butt. And you're like, you're a $4 million product. You can't. So anyways, some of that's true. Some of that's just for fun. But there's just a lack of operational competency that makes the integration that much harder. And you learn, and they don't know their businesses as well, so you learn a lot more after the fact. And typically what you learn is not always great. Like, InfoSec breaches that they didn't disclose during an acquisition. Not that that ever happens. Or bad contracts that they wrote to juice their bookings so that they get one more turn on the multiple. And then you have to go sue their private equity sponsors for fraud. Like, these are things that happen in smaller companies. And their audit firm for attesting it. Hypothetically, right? These are stories I've heard. I'm just a storyteller. All right, anything else? Yeah.
Your background coming up through sales leadership.
Yeah.
Now you've got your relationship with your CRO. So how do you give them the room to really do their job and kind of work through that relationship, just given your background, your experience, and trying to give them the space to be successful?
I'm awful at it. I used to think I'd be the best CEO for a CRO, right? I don't know if I'm the worst or if I just can't figure it out. I just hired a new one, again, it's my third, that kind of tells you something. And I don't know if it's bad hires, I don't know if it's me. I'm still trying to figure that one out. It's hard because I had a pretty successful career, before this. And that's all I ever wanted to do. It's all I was ever really, I love selling software. I still get the joy when we ink a contract. I still high five reps virtually. I love it. I'm passionate about it, right? I've tried to become their best sales rep now and not their boss, right? So I've really struggled with my first one. I'm like, go do whatever. I'm not going to mess with you. Oh, that was terrible, right? Because then we did our first quarter review, and I'm like, what are you doing? This is all wrong, right? So that was bad. And then the next one, and she did 2.5 great years with us, and she got a great big job, and so I'm actually really proud of her and happy for her. But, what I found was there are things I'm going to be involved in. I have a lot of experience. I love doing them. And so what I've kind of said is, hey, this 20%, you just got to deal with me, right? I'm going to unapologize. And you're a CEO, right? You can get involved in anything you want. And you got to go deep. Product management, engineering, HR, finance. You got to go deep as a CEO in all of those because that's a big part of your job in driving accountability. But in sales, it's like, hey, on the top 5 customers, I'm going to be the sponsor and I want to be the face of the company, and I'm going to do that, right? Or if you do commission plans, right? I've contributed to. I wrote a book on this, right? Those couple things, I want to be a thought partner to you on. So bring me in as a thought partner. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I want to be involved. The rest of it is yours, right? And we'll show up through normal inspection and governance and everything else. But I'd be a liar if I said that I've got that nailed. I'm still trying to figure that out. When I'm done here, I might just go back to selling again because it's so much easier. Because I don't care about what color the font of the logo is. I know I should, right? But I really don't. And picking the benefits plan sucks because it is like The Office, and you don't want to be that guy that's like, should we cover semaglutide? Well, we'll go bankrupt. And if we don't, our people with diabetes will hate you and actually write horrible things online about you. And like the CEO thing is very, all the crap you hear about it is very real. Now, it's also awesome. Every day is different. There's so much variability. It's intellectually stimulating every day. It's a higher degree of accountability. You still own the sales number, so that doesn't go away. But I am really trying to find what right looks like there, and I am willing to sit here and own that it's probably a big part of me, still figuring it out. Yeah.
I think one of the most impactful things you talked about is financial literacy.
Yeah.
Like the thing that I've seen with
Yeah.
like the small, mid-size, early, first the beginning of a turnaround, right after the sponsor comes in, good marketers don't know what a P&L is, much less how to read a report. My role has typically been helping them learn that from higher runoffs.
Okay.
So helping them learn that and building that out. I found it very difficult when dealing with non-financially literate CROs.
Yeah.
Any tips on what you've seen work?
Well, first of all, they'll age out because I don't think you can get away with it much longer. I don't think it's going to be the way. The dumb sales guy or gal that shows up and barks orders and looks great in a suit and kind of commands a presence, some of that's helpful now, but you got to be smart as a whip, and I think you need to be a business person first and a salesperson second to be a great sales leader anymore. And so if your CRO doesn't realize that, yeah, good luck. I'm also a sales leader that very candidly, I was ops heavy, right? So I believe the best sales organizations have the best sales ops teams, and then you can enable the sellers, right? It's training, it's reinforcement, it's the data, it's the activity, it's the systems, it's the tools. So I may have a bias there, but what I will tell you is, I don't know how I help you do it, but for me, we had a CFO named Mark Hubler, and he and I would get in all these fights. And finally, it's just so funny when you actually look in the mirror and you go, maybe it's actually me, right? And finally, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go to lunch with you every week, and I want you to tell me what you do every day, right? And I almost treat him like a customer, right? I'm like, what do you look at? Show me the P&L, show me a balance sheet, show me why we're capitalizing software. What does that even mean? Okay, I got it, so we're deferring costs on multi-years. What if I actually commit to a roadmap thing and you have to, you have to take revenue against that now, it's a liability. So we just did it over lunch for a lot of months. And then I really started paying attention, and I started getting him to invite me to some finance meetings, right? Which can be very gloss over until you start to understand the impact of what they're talking about. But unless they understand how it'll help them, they're never going to get better. And so maybe it's, hey, we could get this contract done faster if you understood, or, hey, let me show you a couple things that I think may help you go. Salespeople do love speed. I've yet to meet a sales leader that doesn't love speed, right? Time to value, time to market, time to win. So if you can convince them that it'll help them move faster, maybe they'll open a door for you. Yeah.
Talk about the three options you have. When you get aggressive, have you ever done value-based contracts?
No.
So what was your, okay.
I won't do them.
Yeah.
I get asked, so the question was if we ever done value. So it's basically, it's a variable contract where you basically, if you perform whatever value, you get a cut of it, right? Is that what you're asking? Yeah, no. Software companies, but there's a reason why. I'm not philosophically opposed to it. I believe, hey, however you make money, you make money. But what makes software companies valuable? What the reason Simpler is going to sell for 22 to 24 times EBITDA, right? And most services companies will sell for 9 times, is because we have predictability in our ARR, right? And that predictability, I would rather take a lower amount and get the same amount, plus 5.5% every year, right? Than get a spike one year and a down year the next year, right? Lumpiness creates lower multiples. Consistency creates extraordinary multiples. That's what makes us so valuable.
Hey, BJ, on that, I know you guys have some seat pricing, but you're probably exploring others because of the nature of, hospitals running 24/7. What is your thought? Because there's a lot of software debate right now on seat pricing evolution away from SaaS. Where are you guys going, or what are you seeing?
So we just redid, I just paid Boston Consulting Group $9 million to tell me what I already knew, which is awesome. But the board wanted to hear it from them. But it's the burden we bear, right? I did get a COO out of it. I hired the head of digital health for Boston Consulting Group to be my COO. So it's worth $9 million is what I tell him, or friggin' better be. So we're moving, I've got every consumption model you can have under the sun right now because of all the acquisitions. I've got seat-based, I've got net patient revenue, I've got beds, I've got PEPM, I've got all of it. We're trying to standardize on our new MSLAs on a seat-based model, but we do price leverage on a true slab-based, right? So if you guys understand, it's not tier, but slab pricing, right? So the more you spend, the aggregate value of the next seat goes down such that, the discounts get bigger and bigger and bigger. But you're not doing it retro. You're not doing it in reverse, which is why it's slab, not tier, right? And in tier, you actually reset the entire price. That's what we're moving towards. It's not the most sophisticated model, but healthcare is not the most sophisticated buyer, right? Were I selling more horizontally, I don't know if this would be the path I'm taking, but in a world where, I'm displacing 30-year-old tech here. A lot of these guys are paying maintenance on on-prem products, right? I can kind of get away with it still, and it's still the most advantageous for Simpler, and it provides good value for them. So that's where we are now. Yeah. We have had to really, we were aggressive going out of the gate on annual price increases, and we have found that this market is not completely, but more resistant to it than others that I've come from. I'm probably about I'm about 62% of where I'm used to being on annual price increases. So one lever that I don't quite have in the bag anymore. You know, the best way to drive growth, though, is churn reduction, right? If you can drive your net retention up, you know, over your budget, it's free growth. You don't have to pay commission on it, and customers are happier, and it's a great flywheel. So I do tell my teams all the time, right? You know, my commission plans don't have to go up every year if our churn goes down. So if you actually do both, you're helping yourself out. Anything else? All right, well, I'm going to Los Angeles. If I am still the CEO of Simpler tomorrow afternoon, you will know it will be a good day. Thank you all for listening. Super fun for me to talk about this stuff.